Hi, I'm Jessie.
And I'm Natasha.
And together, we host Not Creative, the podcast that flips the script on creativity, bringing together the ones with the ideas and the ones who make it all happen behind the scenes.
In each episode, we dive into the minds of creatives, problem solvers, and the people who prove you don't have to wear the creative label to shape brilliant ideas.
Let's get into it.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Doug, you need to say words because Doug is just waving.
Hi. Hello.
For the viewers at home, Doug is waving.
All right, this is a podcast. What a great start. Grandpa Simpson. I'm frightened.
I'm keeping all of this in.
Oh, man.
I'm keeping all
Hello.
this in.
Right.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome to Not Creative, the podcast that brings together voices from both sides, the creatives and the not creatives who make it all happen behind the scenes. And we have a very exciting guest with us today. Hey, Doug.
Hey.
Doug Kessler is a legend in marketing, working with some of the world's biggest tech companies, as well as some of the hottest challenger brands. Doug has been both a suit and a creative, but is best known, at least by us, as the co-founder of Velocity.
Howdy. Glad to be here.
We're really excited to have you, Doug.
Same.
Yeah, you're what we say in the biz as a get.
I've been got.
You're a get. You should see your rider. Oh my God.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the green M&Ms here. We definitely had that in there, that I don't do green, but it's okay.
Okay, I'll get a guy on that. One of the things that has always been a funny part of our story, or funny part of your story, I guess, is we obviously know you as a creative mind, a creative person, a person whose both job title is creative and whose output is creative. But you actually started your life in marketing as a suit.
Yeah, not a lot of people know it. It's true. I knew I was into advertising in a big way, and it's like the 80s and Madison Avenue and everything, end of the Madman era, and really wanted to work at Ogilvy and got a whole bunch of informational interviews. You know how you do that, just ask who else can I talk to, and they were really nice about it. And one guy said, look, do you have a spec book for being a copywriter? I said, no. He said, how much money do you have in the bank? I was like, $60. He said, be an account person. And he called and picked up the phone, called the head of accounts, said, I want you to hire this guy. It was like that. And it was like, you don't have enough money or time to make a spec book, be an account person. And so I went into the account management training program at Ogilvy and Mather. And it was like, to be an assistant account executive and be trained for that.
That's wild. With that origin story, I guess you still had your sights set beyond, being an account person, but it was sort of a stepping stone.
I didn't think of it that way at all. I was really thinking of a career in account work and in advertising. I liked the work up to a point, and I realized what I sucked at. And I, over time, started looking with envy over at the creative department and thinking, I think I'd have more fun doing that. But it took me a while. Like I didn't think of it as a stepping stone. I was really up for the learning, and it was a great place to start. I mean, I think most creatives would really benefit from a little bit of time in account work. You see a lot of the business. You kind of understand the stresses and relationships a lot better. And I definitely swore to myself, if I do this, I'm not going to be a prima donna creative. If I do switch over, I won't be one of those fuckers, And it was always like inversely proportionate. The less talented, the more prima donna they were. And the more talented, generally, the less so. And I just made a note to self, like as we grew Velocity, don't be one of those, account people are there to carry the bags for the creatives. Like, agencies tend to be one or the other. And with Velocity, we really wanted it more balanced.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, if you reflecting on your journey and where you started and where your career ended up leading you from a creative perspective, how would you define creativity? Like, what does it mean to be creative for you?
I mean, I mean, the premise of their podcast is there's not creative and creative. I don't really see it that binary. I think of you guys as very creative people. I know what you're doing, and I think it's very clever, and it's a cool way to think about it. And the industry does think of it this way. When I got into the industry, I was like, wait, you call them creatives? That means implying no one else is creative? It felt weird. Um, for me, creative is play. I really just like to play with ideas and explore things. And that's it. It's just really having a good play. And that's why I think it's a really fun job to have is you get a challenge and you start playing around with it.
Yeah. I mean, I have the privilege of knowing you, as a person as well as a colleague. And I know you come from a really creative family. You actually have creativity almost, it seems, in your blood with, filmmaking and writing kind of pouring out of your family in abundance. I mean,
Yeah,
was creativity a big part of your life always?
it was. And I think it was like you didn't notice till you kind of see other families that don't do that. But, culture and reading and everything was big. My dad was a writer and brothers are writers and filmmakers. And there was one thing at the dinner table my dad would ask, "What'd you do today?" And you had to have a good a good answer to that. It wasn't just like nothing much. And so during the day you'd kind of monitor what you were doing so you'd have a way to tell dad. And being the youngest, my oldest brother is 5 years older. So his answers were always so much better, like so much more articulate, so much more creative. And so I had this kind of like urge to be able to do that, express myself well. So it was creativity, but it was also about articulateness and really saying what you meant, not just generally, conveying the idea.
So much pressure. I can't imagine like every single day having to come up with a good answer for
Well,
what
I
to
was a
do today.
competitive little fucker, and I feel I wanted to close the gap. My dad had a caption contest on the fridge all the time, so he just put a
Wow.
picture up with lined paper under it. And my brothers were always better, and my dad wasn't one of those "it's Dougie's turn to win" kind of guys. So I never won. I don't think I won once, but I would like beat my head against the wall to come up with a good caption for this. And theirs was always so much better. And so, yeah, I guess it was pressure, but I saw it as fun too.
Nice. And reflecting back, I mean, would you say creativity is a gift, a calling, a curse? Like, do you think that none of the above, something completely else, completely
I think
different?
it's totally a gift, but I also think it's a human faculty that everybody has. And I hate the idea that it's a precious thing and the creatives who try to make it that. There is mystery to it, but everyone has it. I really don't think there are people who don't. It's just expressed in different places and ways. And you guys are way more creative in problem solving the kind of like client related and project related problems we get than I'd ever be. I sit there and go, "Blah, blah, blah, blah," I got nothing. And you guys are on it and in there and figuring stuff out. That's creative to me. So everyone has their realm, but for me, it's just like a natural as any other bodily function, you know.
Nice. I mean, one of the things that's actually come up, you talk about collaboration, that kind of segues. It's almost like I set you up for this question. Um, One of the things that's come up in conversations a lot is almost managing creativity and particularly managing other people and other skill sets, other disciplines to create creative output, to have something at the end that is, in our world, it's been marketing, but it could be literally anything. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you about was how you do you facilitate creativity? And as a two-part question, how do you enable others to do it without saying, just move over and let me do this because I'm better at this than you?
Yeah, I've been guilty of that at times, obviously only with writing and not the other creative disciplines. It's a really interesting challenge because as the head of a creative department, when I was, managing writers was very different. That's my discipline than designers and devs. Devs are like, from Venus. So how are you going to manage creativity when you have no clue how they do what they do? And actually, it puts a light on your question of, well, what's the managing part? How do you get good creative out of someone when you couldn't do it yourself? And it took me years to be confident enough, even giving feedback to designers, or any sense that I could suggest a solution versus just kind of express my discomfort with what was in front of me. But part of it is, I think, the fun part should be there, but also the raising the bar of like, this should be great. This should be really great. And part of a brief is not just this is what has to be done. It's to inspire the creative to want to do something special. And I just think that's part of a brief. And if that's not there, I don't know what could bridge the gap. Like if there isn't this sense that what I want to do something special here right now. Without that, it's kind of like, well, what do you think's going to come out? And then with it, I just think anything's possible.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to hear you talk about like how you're approaching a brief and wanting to do something great. But what happens when you have a creative block, like you yourself, but also like managing a creative team? Like how have you overcome a creative block, and how have you helped your team overcome it?
Yeah, blocks can really suck. And for me, they don't tend to come early. They tend to come, let's say, long time into a client relationship where they hate this, they hate this, they hate that. This one hates this, that one hates that. And they're sitting on your shoulder. Every time you come up with something, they're there and you hear them. Those are common. So there's, some ways to try to blow those away and try not to act like the incumbent. Try to act like you're pitching for the business and you haven't heard all those things. That can help. There are little techniques like there's one I like, which is like the opposite or the negation technique. You have an idea. Usually your first ideas are pretty much the obvious, the conventional ones. What would the opposite look like? And usually really bad. Like if you say, well, this beer tastes good, this beer tastes shit. Like, where do you go from there? Like, it will be a more interesting place. You can't just stay there necessarily. But that's one technique. There's a bunch of them like that, which is just ways to break the frame a little bit and start yourself over. And there are times it's like, get the hell out of the office, get somewhere else with a blank piece of paper and forget everything. And I'm not a great brainstormer in a big group. I tend to like one-on-one bouncing more than a whole bunch of people.
Yeah. I think one of the um times, well, not as if it's one time, the friction points that I've had with you in our career, in our working life is I'm very quick to go, remember that didn't work, Doug. Remember she doesn't like that thing. I'm
Yeah.
usually the physical manifestation of that voice on your shoulder going,
Sometimes.
no, no, no. To,
Yeah.
eternal regret, being a killer of ideas early. But
It's
um
realism. It's realism. But there are sometimes we've had it where it's like you're saying, but she said this. It's like, I know she said that. I totally get that. We need to convince her that's not what she wants. Like, and I know she won't like it at first. So how do we figure out a way to do that? And
yeah.
so sometimes, I mean, obviously we got to give clients what they want. This is a service business, but really the job is to make them want the right thing. And sometimes the brief isn't right and needs to be challenged. You're good at this. You challenge it all the time. So, but you're right. Some of our friction has been, that's going to go down in flames, Doug. And it's like, generally you've been right about that. They do think.
I think this is such a I feel like this is such a real topic that we still live like every single day. I feel like it doesn't matter how long you'll be in this industry, there'll always be that tension point between pushing creativity and pushing ideas and then clients and their reality. So from your experience, like how can you convince a client if you really strongly believe that a creative solution is right for them, but you also know that they probably won't go for it? Or
Yeah,
yeah, so how
it's
do you go
tricky.
about that?
I think if I have a regret about my creative career so far, it's that I didn't get a little more prima donna more often
Mm.
and just get a little bit like, no, like I've been very service oriented. Oh, they're not comfortable with that. Okay. It's like, no, no, this is better. And they need to hear that my conviction, my belief in the idea is part of our product. And if we don't attach that belief to the idea, we're not doing the full job. But I do think one thing it took me way too long to realize in my career, embarrassingly, is how important relationships are to everything good in our world. And that's where you guys own. You guys own the relationship. Obviously, we should too. Everybody should. But if you have this strong, trusting relationship where they know you're good at what you do, they trust that you're in it for the right things, almost anything's possible. They will listen. And if you don't, well, nothing's possible. And so I think our whole industry should pay a lot more attention to invest a lot more resources and time and energy into relationships. And if that relationship is strong, all things are possible. And we've all been there when you get out of sync with the client or with each other. And then it's like, oh, the relationships aren't, they need that work before you can do any good work. Nothing good's going to come out of it until you get back in sync and into a strong, trusting place. And, it feels like we all know this, but we still spend most of our energy just throwing ideas against people and not really attending to the underlying relationships.
I love that. I love how Doug is making us look like our jobs are really, really important, Jess.
I thought that was why we had him on the show.
Yeah.
We're not going to
Guys,
publish this. This is
I
just
think,
for me.
you guys are complete creative allies. And what I was realizing, there was a time of Velocity. I don't know if you remember this, Jess, but we all were innovative people in the creative team and beyond, but we weren't innovating. We couldn't figure out why. It's like we all wanted to. And in the creative team, it's like, why? Because the account people aren't in the room. If we had an account person in the room who understood what we wanted to do here, they would know which relationships are up for this, which accounts have the appetite for the kind of innovation these weirdos want, and, how do we bring this forward and sell it? And without that, like, we could come up with a million things. They're not going to go anywhere. But you get an account person in the room they're like, leave it with me. Like, we had this, we were developing a new medium called a velocity string, which is kind of like SlideShare on steroids. You just click and like a rat and getting the cocaine in a maze. And the story would unfold as you click. And we brought Jody and you in, Jess, and you guys sold it before we even had spec'd it properly. And it's like, oh, that's how innovation happens. It was a real penny drop moment for me of that's how it happens because of relationships. Don't expect just ideas to prevail. I think the naivety for me coming into the business was the best idea will win. And so just focus on having good ideas. It's not that at all. It's everything along the way.
Jody sold that. I
Well,
don't want to steal her credit on that. She sold it
you've done
before
it
it
many
existed.
times too. You've done it
I was
many.
just there going, yay!
Why do you think this divide happened? Do you think that there was a moment in time in advertising or like marketing world where the split happened between the concept of the creative and everyone else? Like, it's even what inspired us to do the podcast, right? Like, because you do have a whole discipline in agencies called creative, not just in agencies, like now more and more also in house. And then you have everyone else who are adjacent to creativity, but they are the ones that are actually making the creativity possible and bringing it to life. So, like, why do you think that this divide happened?
Well, I do think people are different and that people have strengths and weaknesses for sure. Like when we do the offsite, sometimes we do the, what's that called? The test where it's ENTJ and
Oh, Myers-Briggs.
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 And it always reminds me, oh, everyone isn't just like me in their head. They're different. And thank God, because I suck at so many things. If we didn't have people who liked those things, then how would you grow a business? And I think the things I'm good at must be things that others would hate. So I think it's rare to find someone who's good at all of them. And so the division of labor seems good. But what comes with it, I'm not crazy about, is this kind of hierarchy of, the holiness of creativity and the devaluing of the other work is unnecessary and inaccurate. But I think the division of labor does feel natural.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things you dislike, I mean, I'm full of segues today. I don't know how the magic is flowing, but we're just moving seamlessly without interruption from one bit to the next.
Until you pointed it out.
Well,
You
I
had to
like
ruin it, Jess.
signposting. I like clear signposting. I've always been enchanted by this idea of a room 101, not the torture chamber from the 1984 book, but from the British TV show, because Doug is also an expat living in the UK. We should have said this is a podcast that has collected a lot of expats
Yeah.
from other quarters of the world. And what I liked about the show was that you could banish a concept, a thing, a person, whatever, into Room 101 and just wipe it off the face of existence. So when it comes to creativity, what would you banish into Room 101?
God, yeah, boy, I probably have a list. I was, something like mission, vision, values kind of things. I'm not big on those, and particularly the values part. I think like we all have values. Do we really need our employer to tell us what our values are? And, so I've never seen a value statement that would mean anything to anyone much, so I hate them, but they don't hurt anyone either. So you go ahead and make them. So there's one that I hate, which is like a class of feedback that we get all the time, which is don't be negative. You can't be negative. That's one I would put in Room 101. It's like somewhere there's a marketing book where someone said that in a chapter, don't be negative. I want to find that book, find the author, hit them with the book. It's bullshit. There is so much power in negative emotions. And of course, the trick is you don't want to be a negative brand. You don't want to look like you have a chip on your shoulder, you're angry. But there's a lot to hate in this world, including the obstacles to, let's say, our customer success, right? There's plenty to hate. And I think tapping that hate and that frustration is super powerful. And if you can only be Pollyanna positive about everything, that's why people hate marketing. It's not real. It's not like people talk. So I hate that one. I would banish the don't be negative rule.
I remember when I'm not gonna name names here, but we were working with a client that we all really liked, and we wanted to do like a piece of content, and we could do like a negative route or a positive route. And I don't remember if it was a client, if it was us at a time that like we were using a specific like user testing platform.
Yeah.
And we actually wrote the piece exactly
Remember
the
this.
same,
I remember
negative
this.
and positive, and we tested it. And the negative was just like so much more powerful. It just
Yeah.
sounded so much better because it was a support, like it was something about tech support or something like that, like a support
Yeah.
type of service. And it's like, why would anyone need support? Because things go wrong, right? Like, how
Yeah.
do you talk about support in a
I
positive?
remember that. And I quoted it for ages since. It was like 10 mistakes in versus 10 tips for. And the 10 mistakes, everybody, that was the popular piece compared to
Yeah.
the other. And of course you want to know like, oh, I don't want to make those mistakes. I want to look at that. So yeah, I remember the first time we actually tested it, but I was like killing myself thinking, what if it doesn't? It was very gratifying.
Something I'm really curious, Doug. What is your favorite creative work that you have produced?
Gosh, man. Oh, a jingle. We just did a jingle. Jess, talk about selling innovation. Jess knows that I've wanted to do a B2B jingle my whole life and my whole career. And we had a bounty out, like 1,000 quid to an account person who sells in the first B2B jingle.
Oh my God, you owe
And
me money. Oh my
well,
God, you owe me money.
I didn't say it was coming out of me, but another case where, Jess found the opportunity. We sold in a jingle and it was, God, I want to play it for you. The one that we did one that was an Andrews Sisters version that I absolutely loved. It wasn't the one they picked, but at that point I wasn't going to be a prima donna because we did like 50 that were all really fun. And I giggled from the minute they said yes. Actually, no, there was a nervous period. Like, what the fuck are we doing a B2B jingle for? And just so you know, it was a podcast sponsorship program. So audio mattered and knitting them together with a jingle made sense. But once we started getting back things from the jingle house, I was just giggling because I grew up on jingles. I mean, a kid in the 70s, 80s, America, every brand was sold with jingles, not B2B, but everything else. And so I absolutely loved the project and I loved the outcome. And that was my most fun project for sure.
I mean, I think one of
Nice.
the things that made that process really interesting was you found a really good production partner
Yeah.
who shared your spirit of exploration to say, I'm going to throw a million options out here because there isn't a strong precedent of what a brand like this should sound like.
Yeah.
And you found somebody who could give you variety when and I'm not saying it was a bad brief. It was like, what could we articulate? Like innovation. Okay,
Yeah.
how do you articulate that in a sound, you know?
They were amazing. They were amazing.
And they just gave tons of options and they created scales that I don't think we had considered of,
Yeah.
how
We didn't know.
playful do we want to be and how, formal or how corporate sounding or, is it sort of a dichotomy of, opera and string music because obviously that's
Yeah.
the opposite sort of tech, so do we lean into that and make it, like this is obviously a joke. There was a lot of
Yeah.
the process was really good. And to bring it back to not creatives, that's really someone who's been through a process and goes, I know I need to give you more than you're asking for.
Yeah.
And that's not over service. I'm just going to throw shotgun options out there and see what you gravitate to. And even then there was I think they labeled them. I can't quite remember the labels.
Yeah, some were kind of classic traditional, some were more about contemporary but yeah, there were some other, and you're right, the variables they work with are things we didn't consider. When you pick a specialist at anything, you realize, aha, that's why it's a specialty. They're
Sound
into
is very
all the
hard.
nuance. Yeah.
Sound is very, very hard. We worked on a project not long ago that had sound design because like when we're doing motion, sound is very common, and it's
Mm.
so difficult because it's hard to brief. Like
Yeah,
it's not something that like people are usually familiar with. So
the
it's really hard to
words.
brief. How
Yeah,
do you brief sound? And then it's so subjective because you might want a sound of innovation, but innovation might sound different to different people. Or
mhm,
maybe one person wants something more organic, the other one wants something more techy. And until you actually listen,
yeah,
you cannot. It's such a difficult thing, and even to give feedback, or like looking for potential things that could look or sound the same or similar to what you like, but you
yeah,
don't want exactly that. So how do you create iconic sound that will be very ownable for that brand or for that campaign?
yeah.
It's a
But
very, very hard thing to
it's a
do.
good lesson for us because our clients haven't dealt in our variables. We live with our variables all the time. We talk this language. We have words for all of it. Most of our clients don't, and we're impatient with that. We assume they do, or we're impatient when they don't. It's like, no, this is our job to help them. So, that Jingle House was so great. I think Human, they were called, right? Human?
Human, yeah.
Yeah. They're good at that. They're just like, we're going to use these words and we'll talk about what they mean. And, so it was a reminder to me that when you're out there, when clients are outside their comfort zone, it's kind of our job to get them to a place where they feel confident to make decisions.
Well, I'm gonna use Jesse's like smooth segue, smooth segue technique, uh, to ask you that what is the number one thing that not creatives do that you value the most?
Uh, I mean, creating kind of the conditions for that play that we talked about is important. And a brief that inspires doesn't just kind of lay out the landscape. It makes me think, ooh, I want to do this, And then, protecting the time to get it done, which isn't always possible. Those things are super important. I think patience, poor Jess and you, Nat, when I like to keep my options open as long as possible. Like I don't even want to finish the script till we hear the actor on the day at the shoot. And, it's not very professional, but the longer I can keep them open, the better. And so a little bit of patience and indulgence in that, I hope, pays dividends. I know it's easier and more fun for me, but I know that it isn't always for the non-creatives who have to corral me. Mm.
It's not you. It's the client really that we're worried
Yeah,
about in those scenarios.
I know. And they don't, I can say it'll be better if we can pivot here now that we're at the shoot and we see what's happening. But I know that the script was like a contract. We all signed it. We will deliver it. But look, we can do better right here, right now. But I get it.
Do you have a favorite not creative?
Yeah, I mean, because you're asking, I don't get to say Jess. So, but obviously you're wonderful at this. You're a champion at of creative. But Julie Clark, our head of project management, I didn't even know what project management was, much less why we needed it. It's like, isn't that what account people do? And once I knew what it was, I wasn't sure we needed it. And then Julie came along. It's like, oh, project is important. And she's just the most patient, smart, flexible person. Like, she owns every detail, but I never feel that like I'm letting her down when I, need more time for something, or, things needs a little bit of juggling. So, just that kind of empathy she's got, but also totally on it, totally professional. So she's a favorite.
I just love that.
For those on audio, if it sounds like a stampede running past, people were literally just running past the room I'm in. So apologies if that's come across on the
I
mic.
want to see that. Pivot the camera.
It's a creative emergency.
Yes, there's a fire somewhere. I think you should be evacuated.
Goofy.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, Doug, for joining us.
It was really fun. If this is the only way we three can get together for a chat, then let's do that.
I mean, we should go for a drink. I mean, this shouldn't be the only way that we actually get to have a chat.
Absolutely.
We're gonna
Martini
do
without a mic.
Yes. Well, we're going to do the Burn It to the Ground spinoff where we all tell the real truths.
The end of career, a career-ending podcast. Good idea.
Exactly. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks
This
for
was
having
really
me, guys. It was fun.
cute.
Take care. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to Not Creative.
If you like this episode, follow us for more and spread the word.
You can find us on all the streaming platforms, Instagram, and YouTube at Not Creative Podcast.
Catch you next time.
I mean, that was pretty freaking good, man.